Giants of the Faith, a podcast where we explore some of the great figures in Christian history. I'm your host, Robert Daniels, and today we're going to talk about Mark Buntain, a Canadian evangelist and missionary who founded a hospital and a feeding program in Calcutta, India. This episode is for Tim Svoboda, who won the graphic novel contest from a few months ago by suggesting Buntain. Thanks very much, Tim. Mark Buntain was born in Winnipeg, Canada in 1923. He was the son of a Pentecostal minister, and he grew up with a passion for missions. Mark's father was the pastor at a large church in Winnipeg before he took a position in Toronto as the general superintendent of the Assemblies of God in Canada. He worked as a radio broadcaster before he felt the Lord calling him to the ministry. In 1953, he and his wife, Huldah, received a letter from the Assemblies of God inviting them to go to India for 1 year of evangelistic services. So they boarded a ship in New York along with their young daughter Bonnie and began the long journey to Calcutta. They arrived in Calcutta, a city with a metro area of over 14 million people, and began to preach the gospel in a large tent. They faced many challenges, such as monsoons, poverty, and local opposition, but they also saw results. They saw people get healed, they saw people delivered from evil, they saw conversions to the faith. Eventually, they rented a hall above a nightclub on the main street where they held nightly services. They called it Hell Downstairs and Heaven Upstairs. Their services grew, and Buntain soon felt the need to build a church and a school for the poor children. But they were worried that finding land in such a crowded city would not be easy. But God provided for them through a Muslim friend who they rented their current space from, who decided to sell the Buntains a piece of property behind the church. They dedicated their first school in 1964 with 200 children enrolled. One night, a beggar walked into their service and shouted, "Preacher, feed our bellies and then tell us there is a God in heaven who loves us." This touched the Buntains' heart and inspired them to start a feeding program for the hungry. They began feeding only a handful of people, but soon that number grew to thousands. They also opened a hospital, a nursing school, an orphanage, and even other ministries to serve the physical and spiritual needs of the people. Though they were initially called to India for only a year, the Buntains spent their entire lives there. Mark died in 1989 at the age of 66. He had a heart attack while preaching in Calcutta, and he was buried near their church, where thousands of people came to pay their respects. His wife, Huldah, continued his work until her death in 2016. Their daughter Bonnie and their son-in-law Lowell now lead the ministry, which has expanded to other parts of India and even beyond. Mark Buntain was a giant of the faith who dedicated his life working for the people of India. He was a man of compassion who fed the hungry, cared for the sick, and preached the gospel. And he was a man of vision who built a church, a school, and a hospital. And he was a man of faith who trusted God for the impossible. He was also a man of love who showed the love of God to the least of these. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Giants of the Faith. I'm sorry that it's such a short one, but that's just the way it goes sometimes when you have a more obscure subject. If you want to learn more about Mark Buntain, you can check out his biography, The Man Who Wouldn't Give Up by James McQueen. You can also visit his website, calcuttamercy.org, where you can find out more resources and information about his life and the ministry that's still going on. Thanks for listening. Until next time, God bless.